And that's the mantra that I like people to walk away with is commit with perfection, forgive yourself with dignity. And if you keep getting up and aiming at the target, you have to get better.
Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. This is the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we explore ways to build resilience, build confidence, and make our minds work in our favor. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help us intentionally create a rock-solid mindset upon which a vibrant life experience can be built. My name is April Seifert. I'm a psychologist, a life design strategist, and co-founder of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength. Each week, I'll introduce you to an expert, a concept, a technique, or a hands-on practice that will help you build psychological strength in your own life. These are the tools to help you thrive. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April Seifert and I am your host. And this week we are diving head first into the concept of psychological strength and how it is a muscle or a habit that we can intentionally build or cultivate or craft based on decisions that we make day in and day out. This week's guest is just a powerhouse. This week, you're going to hear from Glenn Livingston. Glenn is a Ph.D. trained clinical psychologist who focused on a career in the marketing world for quite some time. It wasn't until he noticed that he had some problems with his own eating habits, which led to him becoming extremely obese, that he turned his work inward to try to figure out how to heal his own relationship with food and the behaviors that resulted. Glenn went on a 2-year journey to understand how the impact of both his subconscious and automatic mind and thought patterns were interacting with the more deliberative and rational thought patterns in his mind, and figure out how to make those two work in his favor and truly understand where those subconscious thought patterns were coming from and how they were contributing to his habit of overeating. This episode is powerful. If you have any behavioral anything, whether it's eating, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's anything, I don't care what it is. If you have any behavioral change that you want to make yourself a better person, to make yourself healthier, to make you more proud of yourself, I don't care what it is. This is the episode that I want you to listen to. This one is powerful. He gives one of the best definitions of psychological strength that I've heard a guest give so far, and the actionable tips that he gives in order to get started and how to do that down the path of changing a really difficult habit is so amazing. We talk about the impact of not having this all or none belief about, man, I'm going to set this goal and I'm going to, never do this behavior again. And then if you slip up, what that means and what that doesn't mean. And the role that neuroplasticity and the progress that you've come, it still counts. Glenn is so incredibly educated and has so much personal expertise in the area of habit formation and change that I'm just thrilled to have him on this episode of the podcast. And I don't want you to miss the free resources he gives at the end. Lots of times guests will come on my podcast and they'll give away free resources, and they're always really great. Glenn's giving away a copy of his book. This is the roadmap of how he lost more than 80 pounds using psychological strength principles to help him do it. He gives away, there's just so much. I just want you to make sure you listen to the end so that you can get all of the incredible, valuable free resources that he is literally giving away on his website, because he's so passionate about helping other people do the same thing that he did. Now, before we dive into that interview, I just want to mention that this episode is being sponsored by the Peak Mind Center for Psychological Strength membership. Each month, we offer our members live online workshops, monthly challenges, expert interviews, a 24/7 on-demand library, a community, you name it. So many resources to build psychological strength. And for a limited time, we are accepting members for $1 for their first month. This is an incredible way to try us out, to see what it's all about, to start building psychological strength with next to no investment. If you head over to www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership and enter the coupon code THRIVE to get $1 for your first month of membership. All right, enough stalling. I'm so excited for you all to meet Dr. Glenn Livingston. Let's roll that interview. Glenn, I am so thrilled that you're joining us for this episode of the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
I am thrilled also, April. I've been looking forward to this all week.
You know, you have such, we were chatting a little bit before we hopped on to record. You have such an incredible background, both professionally and personally, that I think is going to make this episode so powerful for people. And I'm just thrilled to be able to dive into that. To start with today, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and, just how you came to be in the type of work that you do?
Well, I was brought up in a family of 17 psychotherapists. Everybody is a psychologist or therapist. And if something breaks in the house, we all know how to ask it how it feels, but nobody knows how to fix it.
So Thanksgiving is just a riot at your house.
Oh my God, you don't want to be there. And nobody agrees either. They all. As I got a little older, I got interested in having an impact on a greater scale. Because I thought, you spend all these years studying psychology and then you wind up affecting maybe 1,000 people over the course of your career if you're just going to practice locally. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, God bless the people that do that. But I wondered, could I learn more about marketing and have an impact on a grander scale? And I wound up marrying a marketer, and I had a complementary skill set to what she was doing. I knew how to organize these large studies that would assign emotional values and correlate them with purchase interests without having to ask people directly. During this time, however, I had a very serious eating problem. It began without my knowledge when I was about 17, when I figured out that because I'm 6'4" and pretty muscular, if I worked out for 2.5 or 3 hours a day, I could eat anything I wanted to. So like if you've been to a 7-Eleven and they're out of Pop-Tarts, I'm probably the reason. But as I got older and I was married and I went to graduate school and I was commuting 2 hours each way and I had patients and I just can't work out for 3 hours a day. You just can't do it. The doctors started to yell at me because my genetics are pretty poor and that I was probably not going to see my 35th birthday if I kept up like this. I couldn't be 100% present. I would be sitting with suicidal patients or with a couple right after an affair. And being a great psychologist is everything to me. That's all I ever wanted to do. But I couldn't be fully present. You have to lend them your soul. They need to love and trust you enough to take those risks. And if you're not fully present, if they don't feel like there's another human being in the room with them, that's really there with them and their emotions, rather than thinking about when they can get to the pizza place and dislodge their jaw to empty a box or two into it. It's you just can't do it.
So that's like, it was thoughts of like next meal, when you could eat, what you could eat. Is that what was keeping you from being fully present in those
Yes.
in those sessions? Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Thoughts of that. Also feeling guilty about what I had eaten, how I was going to make up for it. When I finally recovered, I noticed that everybody seemed to be smiling at me, and it seemed really weird, a little scary actually, almost like someone dropped me on another planet. And then I realized they were always smiling at me. I just wasn't there. I was so inside my head and looking down and feeling ashamed of myself, and thinking about how I was going to make up for all this, that I just didn't see it. So April, I set out on a quest to fix this all. I figured that, and I learned a lot. All along the way, I learned a lot. But it never really help to permanently solve the problem. Finally, there are a couple of things that happened that flipped my paradigm. I came to understand that the part of the brain that seems to be most responsible for addiction is not a part of the brain that knows love. It comes from the lizard brain, the most primitive part of the brain, where the feast and famine, fight or flight responses, the emergency responses are. And when that part of the brain sees something in the environment, it's thinking like a lizard, which is basically, do I eat it? Do I meet with it, or do I kill it?
I really want to make an inappropriate joke, but I'm not going to. But I really want to. But keep going.
I really want you to now.
I mean, no, I'm not going to go there. Never mind. I like, look at me with my self-control. I'm not going to go there. But keep going.
Atta girl. So I said, the lizard brain only wants to eat, mate, or kill. There's no love there. Love is more of a function of the higher brain, at least the mammalian brain, which says, well, before you eat, mate, or kill this thing, what impact is that going to have on my tribe, the people that I care about? And then the upper parts of the brain are more like, well, what impact is it going to have if you eat, mate, or kill that thing on your long-term goals and the kind of person you want to be in the world, on your creativity or music or spirituality or art or relationships or everything that we really think of as uniquely human. I just got an inkling that maybe it was the uniquely human part of me that had to take control. The other things that flipped my paradigm were that I was doing all this consulting for Big Food, and I saw that they were essentially engineering food-like substances to hit our bliss points without making us feel satisfied.
Oh, tell me more about that, because you have like an internal look into that industry. I'm really curious about more detail there.
So, okay, I was working with a major food bar manufacturer, and I was talking to the vice president. I asked him what the most profitable insight they had that really turned the course for this food bar manufacturer. And he said, Glenn, well, I got to tell you, it's when we figured out to take the vitamins out of the bar because they were making them taste bad and they were expensive. And instead we put that money into making the packaging look really vibrant and colorful and shiny. And I said, wow, so you're telling me that you've created packaging which in our evolutionary nature, a diversity of shiny different colors would signal a diversity of nutrients that are available. So there's a diversity of nutrients. As a matter of fact, this is a big part of the reason why we respond to color in the first place, is because we're attuned to finding those nutrients in our environment. But here he was saying they figured out, with the help of a lot of research, and they pour a lot of money into this, how to create that perception when they're actually giving you less nutrition. And so you won't feel satisfied. You won't actually get it. So they're fooling us. They're faking us out. And then once we had that talk, I started seeing this was happening all over the industry. And I said to myself, well, that's a very powerful force. And you combine that with the billions of dollars spent on advertising and the 5,000 to 7,000 messages, and you start to wonder how anybody could have any chance. And why am I busy thinking that this is an internal psychological problem when there's all these forces aligned against us, very powerful forces from the outside? The last thing that flipped my paradigm was a study that I did myself. I was getting a lot of money to do these big studies. I designed a really big study that I let run for many years. I wound up with 40,000 people who took a survey. And the survey was about what was stressing them in their life, some personality variables, and what foods they couldn't stop eating. And said that people who struggled with chocolate like I do, they tended to be lonely or brokenhearted, maybe a little depressed. People who struggled with crunchy, hard things like chips and pretzels, they tended to be stressed at work. And people who struggled with soft, chewy, starchy things like bread and bagels and that kind of stuff, they tended to be stressed at home. And I thought that was fascinating. It was going to really show a connection, and I made the mistake of thinking that was causal. I talked to my mom because I figured if anybody could give me insight into this, my mom is both a psychotherapist and she happened to have raised me and set up my original feeding patterns. You can have a roaring fire in a very well-constructed and well-maintained fireplace, and it becomes the center of hearth and home. It's a very valuable thing. People gather around it, they make memories, they share stories. It's only if there's a hole in the fireplace that ashes can get out and burn down the house. And I realized that it was that voice of justification, that crazy irrational voice that made it okay to binge because I was lonely or depressed or angry or whatever I might happen to be feeling. That's what I had to deal with, not the feeling itself. And that was a pivotal insight for me. So for my own personal needs, and I never thought I was going to share this, I decided that I was going to draw really clear lines in the sand. Like, I will never have chocolate on a weekday again. And then if I heard any voice in my head that suggested I was going to have chocolate on a weekday, like maybe it would say, oh, you worked out hard enough, it's not going to make a difference, you can always start again tomorrow, or, chocolate comes from a cocoa bean and that grows on a plant, so that must be a vegetable. I would actually hear those kind of things. Whenever I heard that, I would say, that's just my inner pig, and it's squealing for pig slop. The chocolate on a weekday is pig slop, because I said it is. And I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And it made a difference. It wasn't a miracle. I didn't immediately recover. But what happened is I'd have these extra microseconds at the moment of impulse to wake up and remember who I was, what role I wanted the chocolate to play in my life, and why I was doing that. Slowly but surely, I got better. I lost my psoriasis and rosacea and eczema. My triglycerides came way down. I restored a normal weight. I could exercise really well again and just have a normal life. And so I was part of a publishing company. I was a minor part of a publishing company in 2015 when I was getting divorced. And the CEO said he wanted to publish a book just to prove that we knew what we were doing. And I said, well, I have this journal, you see, and it's a little embarrassing, but he says, let me read it. And 2 weeks later, he writes me back and says, Glenn, donuts are pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. He got all excited, and he lost 86 pounds, I think. And we published it, and I knew an awful lot about marketing at that point, so I could put a lot behind it. And it took off. We have, I think we'll have 1 million readers by April.
Wow.
And yeah, it's crazy.
What I think is interesting about what you did, though, is, and this is a nuance that I don't want people to miss, you made all of these sort of hard and fast rules, right? You said, I don't eat chocolate. That is just, that I just don't do that. But the intervention that you had was not so much, okay, so every day I'm behaviorally not going to eat chocolate. Maybe you were trying to do that too, but yours was more, let me capture everything that my reptilian old brain is throwing at me around this rule. Let me just get really self-aware of what my reptilian brain is saying so that I know it and I recognize it and I see it happening. And that self-awareness is leading to that. And I love how you said there was that, few milliseconds between the trigger and when you actually would behave, because that's the point at which you can kind of wedge your foot in the door and start to, over time, slowly widen that gap so that you've got a longer time frame to work with. It takes a lot, but you can do it. And I just think it's a distinction that I don't want people to miss, that it's not so much that you just said, okay, starting today, no more junk food ever, no more soda ever, no more anything. I'm going to change everything at once. I'm suddenly a perfect eater, and that's what I'm going to do. It was more like, okay, what are the things that I shouldn't be doing? What are the foods and things that I shouldn't be eating? Now, let me journal and keep track of what my mind is telling me.
Yes.
That's a distinction that I don't want people to miss.
That's a really key distinction, and it goes along with an attitude of intrigue. And there are a number of reasons people don't want to do that, but I actually think we do it every day without knowing it. Ultimately, I came to understand that character trumps willpower. So in our culture, we're told to make guidelines as opposed to rules. As a matter of fact, they'll say you really can't demonize any food. That's actually the cause of binges. But there's a problem with that when it comes to the research on willpower. See, if I use a guideline about chocolate, which says I'll avoid it 90% of the time, and I'll eat it 10% of the time. Then every time I'm in front of a chocolate bar at Starbucks or wherever I happen to see one, I have to make another decision. Is this part of the, right?
Yep.
Whereas if I say I'll only ever have chocolate on the weekends, then all of my chocolate decisions are eliminated during the week. And basically I've become the kind of person who just doesn't eat chocolate. And there are things which theoretically should be tempting to us as animals in the world, because we are animals in addition to human beings. But they're not tempting to us because we've defined ourselves as not that kind of person.
That right there. Oh my God. Okay. I did an entire episode on identity and how our own personal identity develops and cognitively what that identity means and what falls inside of it and outside of it. And you can figure that out by saying, I'm the type of person who does or doesn't do this, can or can't, should or shouldn't, right?
Yes. And under what conditions?
Exactly. You can draw a perfect line around, maybe not perfect, but pretty good line around what your identity is, and stuff that falls inside of it is stuff that we easily do, habitually do, and stuff that falls outside of it is really hard for us. There's friction there. Whether it's good or bad, there's friction there. It's tough. That's so interesting. So you're redefining what that identity is to become the type of person who doesn't eat chocolate during the week.
Yes. And when I ask people, could you never have chocolate again? They'll say, absolutely not. If I say, could you become the kind of person who doesn't have chocolate? They go, maybe. And I think that's because we all intuitively know that character is something that we can build over time. And you can choose to remake yourself. A classic example which really delineates what you're saying is if you walk into a diner and there's a $10 bill on the table and the waitress hasn't seen her tip and she says, I'll be right back to go get your menus. I'm just going to go get your menus. I'll be right back. And there are no windows and there's nobody up front that would see you take it. 99% of the people that I ask if they would take it in that situation say, no, it's not even a consideration. And I said, does it take willpower not to take it? And they'll say, no. I'll say, why not? They said, because I'm not a thief. And that woman worked hard for her money. It's not my money. It's not an option. So I'll say, so as a matter of character, you have an unwritten rule that says I never steal. Regardless of whether you're going to get caught, it's a matter of character because of the kind of person that you want to be in the world. And then I'll say, well, why can't you do that with food? So yes, it's all about building character, and character is no more than your habitual way of responding to temptation without thinking about it. It just becomes routine, and you by taking the time to articulate what character you want to develop, you then have a yardstick against which you can measure your behaviors and slowly adjust your aim until you get there.
I love this so much. This is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about building psychological strength, right? The title of this stinking podcast is that so much about how our mind works is a habit that you can cultivate. It's a strength that you can choose to develop. And, we have this tagline within Peak Mind where we say your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. And that's what we mean. So you can allow it to go down, and I'm sure you have expertise and thoughts on this. Your reptilian mind, that part of your brain, it's there to help you survive. Like, it's not there to help you thrive and become an actualized person. It's there to help you and the species survive. So it makes you scared of stuff. It urges you to go in certain directions. It's very focused like that on things that will help you survive, meaning make sure you're eating enough, make sure you're procreating. It's not talking about helping you thrive in your day-to-day life. And so if you let that get out of control and you don't have, I think what you're saying is the more intentional aspect of your mind, keeping it in check, if you don't do that, and that's something you have to cultivate intentionally, if you don't do that, you sort of spiral into that direction where it becomes a liability more so. And you end up in a position where those habits it's cultivating are working against you.
Yeah. It's like, are you going to live by your impulses or are you going to live by your intellect and best thinking. And it turns out that discipline actually creates more freedom. People are, and Jim Rohn said, a life of discipline is better than a life of regret, and I very much believe that. But I also think that freedom and discipline are not diametrically opposed. I think that if it wasn't for the discipline of the engineers who made your car, you'd be unable to turn the wheel 30 degrees and have the car turn 30 degrees and go where you want to go. If it wasn't for the discipline of you learning the rules of the road and what a red, yellow, and green light means and who goes first at a four-way stop sign and what does it mean when you come to a yield sign, then you couldn't drive through the city. As a matter of fact, nobody could if we didn't have those rules. We didn't have a discipline of following them because those rules kept us safe from our dangerous impulses and make it possible for you to go where you want to go. If a jazz pianist doesn't take the time to study their scales and understand the structure of music, then they can't pour their soul into improvising away from that structure because they won't know how to get back to it when they need to. So a lot of people are frightened of this kind of discipline because they feel like it's going to constrain them. But the truth is that if you do it right, it actually opens up your life. It doesn't contain it.
That's amazing. Life can be so much more than simply going to work and waiting for the weekend. But deep down, you already know that. You know that life can be so much more vibrant. You know you were made for more than just passively going through the motions. You know you can thrive, but to do that, you have to start from the inside out. And that is why I'm so excited to announce that for a limited time, we're offering you the opportunity to join us in the Peak Mind membership for only $1 for your first month. That's right, $1 to join us in the full Peak Mind membership. All you have to do to take advantage of this amazing offer is to visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Think about it. We all know what we need to do to keep our bodies strong. But what about our minds? What if you had the tools to build the psychological strength, confidence, and resilience to help you thrive at work, at home, and in the rest of your life? What if you made the commitment to living your life by design and not by default? All of this is possible. The goal of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength, is to help you build the mental toughness, flexibility, and resilience to thrive in your life. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help you intentionally create the vibrant life experience you know is possible. Through live online workshops, a 24/7 on-demand library, expert interviews, and monthly challenges, our members are building the psychological strength that it takes to thrive through life's ups and downs. And like I said, you can do it too. For a limited time, we're offering you the opportunity to join us for only $1 for your first month. Just visit www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So what choice are you making? Join us in the Peak Mind membership before this amazing offer goes away. So we're talking about these two sides of your mind or signs of your brain, right? There's the older part. We keep talking about reptilian, right? And that's another distinction I want people to understand. The parts of your brain that fuel that survival instinct, so just keeping you alive, not perfectly, but as a general rule, those in species in the world, like as animals evolved in the world, those parts of the brain evolved earlier or first, meaning they're very old. Like as animals started to evolve to have brains, those parts evolved. So think about it, like the part that keeps your heart beating and keeps you breathing, that was one of the first things to evolve, because if you had to think about making your heart beat, you'd die as soon as you fell asleep, right?
Yeah.
So all of those pieces, they evolved a really long time ago. They're almost completely formed when we're born. So, or earlier on in our own individual lifespans. They're very automatic and they're hard to control sometimes. So again, think about your heartbeat, right? So as animals evolved to have hearts that beat and circulate stuff around them, these parts of their brain evolved, they became things that happen automatically. It's hard to sort of circumvent them because it's keeping you alive, and your impulses to eat follow pretty, and your fear response to things follow pretty closely behind breathing and your heart beating. But what isn't something that's necessary to keep you alive is that higher order cognition. So contrast, something that evolved a long time ago that's almost completely formed when you're born and is automatic, your frontal cognition, like your higher order cognition, that more deliberative part of your brain, that is a relatively new part of our brain. It's not in many of our ancestors. So we have this frontal lobe to our brain that's capable of all this more deliberative thought, but it's not developed until you're in your early 20s in your lifetime. So it's new. It develops later in life. It's very deliberative. It's not automatic, and it's really easy to circumvent it. If we get tired or emotional or distracted or whatever, you can cause that to short circuit. So it's almost like our evolution and biology, the scale is tipped a little bit in the direction of us caving to impulses, which is why we talk about within Peak Mind, and exactly what you're saying with the practice you did, you're pushing the scale down to even it out on that other side in the direction of deliberative thought and giving your rational decision-making capability a chance to just weigh in on that decision about the chocolate versus just chasing it down because you had the impulse to have it.
I couldn't have said that better myself. It's absolutely true.
I love that. So how long did this process take? Because this is not what we typically hear when, you see commercials online and on TV about weight loss and that type of thing. This is not what you typically hear. So how long did that process take for you? What was that like?
Well, what happened immediately was that my sense of powerlessness went away. I was feeling powerless and hopeless, and I thought I was going to be 500 pounds. I thought it was just going to keep going. And that went away. So the feeling like things were just going to keep getting worse, and that felt like a miracle. If you can imagine a ship that's going in the wrong direction and heading from, New York to London and seems to be going to Africa instead, if you finally believe that you're going in the right direction, it's a tremendous relief, even if it's going to be a long time until you get there. For me personally, it took a couple of years to iron this all out, because there were a lot of things that the pig said to get its way. It said that I can't make these very bright lines. I can't say I'm never going to do something again, because eventually I had to evolve to say I would never have chocolate again. For example, the answer to you're going to be deprived forever and therefore you can't stop having chocolate is that our nervous systems actually upregulate when you stop overstimulating them. So if you have a chocolate bar every day, then you can't taste the difference between the sugars in an envy apple versus a Fuji apple, and you don't get the same pleasure response from that subtleties. As a matter of fact, after long enough of having a chocolate bar every day, you won't like the apple at all. That's why so many people say they don't like fruit and vegetables. But if you stop having the chocolate bar and you have the apples anyway, then over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, your taste buds double in sensitivity and your dopaminergic system starts to fire again towards other pleasures in life. And so you're not tortured forever. It's not true. There's a period, the first 100 hours are the hardest, where it feels intensely depriving, and there's a sense of anhedonia, or the inability to experience any pleasure. It seems like life is going to be miserable. But that usually starts to let up after 100 hours or so, and people get better. So everything that the pig said, you might as well just start tomorrow, it'll be the same. Well, that's not true, because by the principle of neuroplasticity, what fires together wires together. If you indulge today, your brain is going to rewire just a little bit to make it more likely you're going to indulge tomorrow. So you're always either reinforcing or extinguishing your addictions. If you're in a hole, you got to stop digging. Now when I work with clients, because I figured all this stuff out already, and I know what the pig's objections are going to be, and I know how to talk people through it, it takes a couple of months for most people to really get it. which is, see, this isn't a treatment. It's not something I do to you like a gastric bypass. It's a system of information and answers to the most common things that your pig is likely saying to constantly talk you out of your best judgment, that if you're willing to put in some thinking work for a couple of months, just like learning the rules of the road when you're going to learn how to drive, then before you know it, it's not going to be much work and you'll be able to, daydream and talk on the cell phone like you do when you're driving. Just becomes a natural part of you. So I got it down from a couple of years to a couple of months. And for things that aren't so linked to survival, like, I remember a woman who wanted to give up popcorn, and we did that in one session. And then she never had popcorn because you don't need popcorn to survive. But for people that are getting the bulk of their calories from, bread or sugar or alcohol or oils, it takes them a while because they need to figure out what they're going to replace that with and what their body authentically needs. So, 2 to 4 months is a typical amount of time we work with people. And, 80-85% of the people that we work with say that it had a dramatic impact.
I love this. Two things are kind of coming up here. One that I don't want people to miss out on too. What you're talking about as you were making these changes, and so going from just capturing what your automatic thoughts are saying and capturing what you're calling the pig, what it's saying to you. When you started to transition from that to making a behavioral change, you didn't look at it as an all or nothing thing. I love that you brought up neuroplasticity, because here we're talking about which behavior gets more weight, not none or all. Which one gets more weight? One of the criticisms that I have with some people's attempts to give something up or change a behavior is that they try to quote unquote cold turkey it. What happens then is if you make a quote unquote mistake and you have the thing that you said you were going to give up, it's all shot. I fell off the wagon, or I didn't do it. And then they consider that the same place that they were when they began, but it isn't. You've just made it however much time. Like, that's a ton of training that your brain has just gone through. You slipped up once. Great. Start again. Like, go again tomorrow. You're fine. And there's a book. I'm curious to see if you've read it. It's called Well-Designed Life. The author is Kyra Bobinet, I think, or Bobinet might be her background.
I haven't, no.
Wonderful. You would love it. It's almost like the complement to what you're saying, where she talks a lot about neuroplasticity and how long it takes to myelinate a new neural pathway. So you're starting a new habit, how much time it takes for that habit, the new one, to become as automatic as the old one was, or close to. It's so great. But the other thing she does is something I'm really passionate about, is this notion of life design. It's using the human-centered design process that created cell phones and the Instant Pot and whatever to set up the environment around you. And this, I think, relates a lot to what you're talking about with discipline. Set up the environment around you so that it supports this new habit, so it's slightly easier to make the new choice than it was to make the old. And it requires less willpower then, because you have to work a little harder to make the old choice. It's just such a compliment to what you're saying. And there's so much backing behind that. And it also allows people, I don't want to say it lets them off the hook for not doing, the new behavior that they want, but it allows you to have a little bit of self-compassion and pride in the fact that you've come that far. It's not all for nothing. That isn't sunk cost at this point. Keep going. Pick it back up and try again. So I just love the way that you're describing it, because it's so backed. I mean, obviously I'm talking to another psychologist, so that's great. You know what you're talking about. But it's all so supported by so many bodies of evidence that are pointing to the same thing.
Can I know we're running short on time, but can I just briefly mention something really important that encapsulates
Go for it. Yeah.
So people are frightened of the word never. My book is called Never Binge Again, but they're frightened of the word never because they say, well, what if I do make a mistake? Then I'm just going to feel really guilty, and that's going to cause me to binge more. And I tell them that if you think about an Olympic archer shooting at a bullseye. Before they let go of the arrow, if you talk to a successful archer, they can see the arrow going into the target. They've committed 100%. They're not thinking maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. I'll do the best I can. They see that arrow going in. And what that 100% perfect commitment allows them to do is to purge their mind of doubt and insecurity so they can really focus on the target. Now, if they miss the target, they don't say, damn it, I am a pathetic archer. I might as well shoot all the rest of the arrows into the audience or up in the air. They don't do that, April.
Thank you for that, thankfully.
They readjust their sails. They take it seriously. They analyze what went wrong. They have a really clear target, so they can know by how much they have to adjust their aim. They're not aiming at a fuzzy target. That's back to the guidelines versus hard and fast rules analogy. And then they commit with perfection again. So they forgive themselves. They take it seriously. They forgive themselves. They commit with perfection and forgive themselves with dignity. And that's the mantra that I like people to walk away with is commit with perfection, forgive yourself with dignity. And if you keep getting up and aiming at the target, you have to get better. That is what our neurological system is designed for. You've chosen a target, you keep making adjustments, you keep aiming at it, you will get better. The reason people slide down into food addiction is because they let the pig convince them to shoot the arrows into the air or just forget about it. Or I think if you touched a hot stove, would you slam your hand down and say, oh my God, I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher?
I'm just going to leave it here now. I just might as well leave it on there now. I'm just going to put my hand right on the stove. It lives here now. I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher.
Right. Or if you accidentally chip a tooth, you go get a hammer to bang the rest of them out. It's crazy, but because there's pleasure involved in the toxic event, people they allow their pigs to perseverate on the guilt, and they don't understand that perseveration, the stuckness, the exaggerated guilt that they feel is actually binge motivated. It's just the pig's goal, the pig's attempt to get you to feel too weak to resist the next binge.
That was huge. Holy cow. Wow. Okay, I really could just keep this going for another hour because we're going down all the rabbit holes that I just think are so powerful that we've hit on so many things that there are nuances of how the mind works that people don't realize, right? Your mind doesn't come with an operating manual, yet it's this thing that controls every emotion you have, every conscious thought you have, every behavior that you have is so dictated by this push and pull of, the reptile and, this new age part of your brain. We just don't realize how much control we have over influencing or tipping the scale or influencing that process or whatever. And it's just the big mission and motivating, why behind why this podcast exists and why Peak Mind exists. So I'm just thrilled. Before I let you go today, I have to ask you about your definition of psychological strength. What does it mean to you to be psychologically strong?
What it means to me to be psychologically strong is to have the ability to govern my most important behavior with my intellect rather than my emotions. That's what that means.
I love that. Oh my God, that's so good. I love asking this question because I'm getting the most insightful answers. And if anything, I'm just going to write them all down and publish that someday because they're just so...
I want to go back and listen to all your podcasts now. This is fantastic.
Amazing. Definitely do it. And before we leave too, I'm hoping that, with everything that you've learned and folks who are listening, this has more to do, we're talking about habits in general, behavioral habits in general. Maybe it's about eating. Maybe you drink too much. Maybe you smoke. It could be any of these behavioral habits. There's likely a similar pig or whatever it is squawking at you from the back of your brain. And there's, your attempt with the newer part of your brain to just chill it out a little bit. These same processes apply. This is why I say our minds are powerful, but they're not that sophisticated. There's 4 things you have to understand about your mind. They're not easy to do, but to understand, it's just not that complicated. This is what I'm talking about. There's basic things that are at play that keep our habits in place. What are your tips for helping people overcome that? How would you tell someone to start? Or what is something that someone's listening to this, something they could do that would at least get them on the right path?
What is the single most difficult trigger food or behavior that you're struggling with? Okay. Can you make one simple rule that doesn't seem overwhelming, that's clear and unambiguous, to make a significant difference in that one trigger food or behavior? An example might be, my example was I'll never have chocolate during the week again. Another example might be I will never eat standing up again, or I'll always put my fork down between bites, or I will always start my day with 2 clear glasses of spring water. One rule that gets things moving in the right direction for you every day, that tells you that you're in control, not your lizard brain. And then watch your lizard brain try to make it. See, some people make the mistake of thinking that to recover from overeating, you need to not have cravings anymore. But it's not true. It's okay that you have cravings. If you put a Doberman Pinscher in a cage, it's still going to lunge at the rib roast when you walk by. The only thing is that's important that you don't open the cage. That's all that matters. I also have a bunch of free stuff on the website. Could I tell them where they can?
Yes, please do. Please do.
So first of all, you can get a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format at neverbingeagain.com. Click the big red button and you'll see what to do. Secondly, we've created, with the same instructions to get it, a set of food plan starter templates, which are sets of rules that work together to give you the basics for any dietary philosophy. So my book is diet agnostic. Whatever diet you want to work with, as long as it's reasonable, we can help you. And there's a set of free food plan starter templates for, ketogenic versus macrobiotic versus point counters versus calorie counters, and vegan versus whatever you happen to be trying to follow. You can get started like that. I'd like you to modify them for yourself for reasons that will become clear as you get through them. And finally, I know it sounds really weird. Why does April have a psychologist on who's talking about this pagan side of him? You must think this is a really strange episode. And some people think it's going to be a really harsh technique, but if you listen to me coach people through it, and I've recorded a whole set of coaching sessions that you can listen to, you'll see it's a very compassionate and loving philosophy. You increase your self-esteem, you don't decrease it. And the best way I can demonstrate that to you is for you to watch the sense of powerlessness and hopelessness and depression that people have when they start these sessions transform into enthusiasm and confidence and hopefulness. So it's all at neverbingeagain.com. Click the big red button and you'll see what to do.
I love it. This has been such a pleasure. I absolutely adore having people on who can demonstrate from different perspectives. So you from the perspective of learning how to take care of your body and eat better, but there's so many different ways that we can have the same conversation to help illustrate to people how their mind works and how much control they have over it. I feel like so many times people don't realize how much their small decisions, the tiny things they do day to day, can so impact, and just having a little bit of self-awareness and a little bit of intention moves the needle so much. So this has just been incredible. Please check out his website. Please grab a copy of the book. I'm definitely going to go watch the sessions that you recorded. I'm so excited to see how this all plays out with, people who need to hear it at that exact right time. Glenn, I just can't say thank you enough. Thanks so much for being here.
I hope we can do this again. This was fantastic. Thank you.
It's a simple fact that nearly everyone in the world could benefit from building psychological strength. But not everyone will put in the time and effort to do so. But today you did. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Building Psychological Strength. Now, if you're interested in building the mental toughness, confidence, and resilience you need to thrive through life's ups and downs, visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com. Also, if there's someone in your life who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And if you yourself found this episode valuable, meaning if you took away even one insight that you can use to build psychological strength in your own life, we would so appreciate it if you would drop us a rating and a review on iTunes. The thing is, the more ratings and reviews we have, the easier it is to get this powerful and important content out to the people who need to hear it. Remember, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So choose wisely, my friend. And I'll see you next time on Building Psychological Strength.